All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Williams with WAS, Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, include your name, your organization, and where you're from. And our icebreaker for tonight is, are you getting up at 2:30 a.m. on Friday morning to see the lunar eclipse? I think they're calling it the blood moon this year.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. We're just waiting for critical mass here. Give folks time to join. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, your name, organization, and location in the chat. And our icebreaker for tonight is, are you going to get up early Friday morning to see the eclipse? And for those who maybe don't know, we are going to be joined tonight by County Executive Ken Jenkins, as well as Assembly Member Dana Levenberg. Their schedules are crazy, so we're going to kind of arrange our agenda around their availability. So just be advised that if they pop on, I'll show an agenda, but depending on when they're able to join us, we'll go to them. So we're just going to let the waiting room slow down, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for coming out. My name's Courtney Williams. I am with WAS, Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. I see a lot of familiar names and a lot of new names, which is awesome. Please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, where you are from. If you're with an organization, share that. And our icebreaker is whether or not you're getting up at 2:30 in the morning on Friday. And it seems like some will, and some will still be up at 2:30 a.m. So I hope you don't have to wake up early and you can go back to bed. So wonderful. And we have a real powerhouse lineup tonight of organizers and electeds, advocates. So we're really lucky to have them all here tonight. We are also recording this, and it will be on our YouTube channel, the WAS YouTube channel. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you have to leave early, you can find it there and definitely share it as well. Our focus tonight is going to be on environmental activism, but obviously the tactics and strategies we'll discuss can be used to address a whole lot of issues. These are the tried and true tactics. So with that, I will get started on the program to be respectful of everyone's time. For those who have joined us before, we usually keep these to exactly 1 hour. We're doing a special 2-hour event tonight to accommodate all of our awesome speakers, and because this is such a hot button issue. But to start, what is Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions? WAS is an alliance of community organizations from Westchester County working to close the Wheelabrator Westchester Trash Incinerator operated by Win Waste Innovations in Peekskill. So sorry, I'm just getting text from people who are having trouble getting in. So with that, let us look at our agenda. So as I mentioned, we're doing a special 2-hour meeting tonight because really this is an emergency. We have all been advocating for a long time. When we had a federal government that was functional, that we had laws, maybe they weren't the best or the strongest or always enacted properly, but they existed. And now we have, our federal government really being crippled and gutted. And we need these strategies more than ever. So tonight, we're going to start with an update on the waste reduction study, which is WAS's primary focus right now with Westchester County, and then we'll go into our program. We are joined by Raya Salter from Energy Justice Alliance, and she serves on the state's Climate Action Committee. She'll talk about statewide strategies. Our county executive, Ken Jenkins, Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg, then Shay O'Reilly from Spring Street Climate Fund to talk about financial strategies, Jessica Roth from Gaia to talk about global strategies, Alexis Goldsmith from Beyond Plastics to talk about nationwide strategies, and last but certainly not least, Mayor Nicola Armacost from Hastings to talk about municipal strategies. I hope we'll get that done kind of in the first hour or so, and then we'll really take off with the community discussion. Feel free to use the chat as we're going through this and engage there for sure. And then when we get to the Q&A, if you, certainly can raise your hand or put comments or questions in the chat. And as always, we will be reminding you to take action. And some of our advocates and allies that are on the call may have action items that they can be sharing tonight. So for those who maybe are joining us for the first time, we shorthand our elevator pitch about the incinerator is to remember the 3 Ps. Trash incineration is bad for people, it's bad for the planet, and it's bad for our pocketbooks. It's bad for people because it is the largest industrial air polluter in Westchester County. Westchester currently gets an F for air quality from the American Lung Association. And the emissions from the incinerator don't know to stay in Peekskill. So they affect everyone in Westchester, Rockland, and the surrounding areas. And we know that Peekskill residents are feeling the health effects of this because the health data shows we have increased rates of the health problems associated with air pollution. As for the planet, it is the largest industrial emitter of greenhouse gases in Westchester County. This is not a green or sustainable solution. And it's bad for our pocketbooks because trash incineration is historically the most expensive way to manage waste. This incinerator is really old. It is 41 years old. The average incinerator is retired at 24 years old. It has an expired air permit, which if it doesn't get renewed, it cannot keep operating. And if it fails or that permit is not renewed, it'll be the residents of Westchester that are left holding the bag on what to do with our waste. So we want the county to invest in zero waste solutions that are long-term, sustainable, make jobs, and will save us money in the long run. So our big push right now is the waste reduction study. So as many of you know who have been here before, we were pushing Westchester County to hire a zero waste consultant to actually make us a roadmap to get us from where we are to zero waste solutions that would make the trash incinerator, it's already obsolete, would make the trash incinerator unnecessary. Instead of hiring a zero waste consultant to make that plan, the County Department of Environmental Facilities got the Board of Legislators to earmark $90,000 for what they call a waste reduction study. And for what we've seen so far, we are not impressed and we have some serious concerns. One of those is that there have been major limitations on public engagement. There has been very poor outreach, little to no information shared with the public to generate substantive comments. And the way they are allowing us to provide input is not good. 2 in-person meetings in White Plains, which is 2 hours from Peekskill by public transportation, and an online comment form that limits comments to 500 words with no email address to send additional comments, nothing like that. The study sets no useful goals, no commitment to zero waste or closing the incinerator. It has exceedingly long timelines and low bars for progress. They really think that their goal is to reduce waste by 85% by 2050. The incinerator will be 66 years old in 2050. So they need better goals and really much shorter timelines, given that Peekskill is facing a public health emergency. There is also no mention of addressing the environmental justice issues faced by Peekskill, no goal to adopt solutions that alleviate the burden facing Peekskill. And in short, we really just worry that they're wasting our time and our tax dollars by studying the problem instead of acting on it. The survey they put out that is now closed, I believe, really was asking common questions like, what are barriers to recycling? We know these answers. We do not need more time and money spent asking these questions. So Lila, if you could drop that link into the chat, that tiny URL link will take you to a Google Doc that has links to the comment form and has sample comment that you can copy paste verbatim and just put your name and your location in there. Or if you want to use it to create your own comments, you can. The comment deadline is next Wednesday, so a week from today. We really want them to be flooded with comments because while we don't know that we can save this study and make this useful, we are hopeful. And that our county executives joining us tonight is also reason for hope. But so please help us out. You don't need to live in Westchester. If you breathe air, you can comment on this. If you live on this planet and are worried about climate change, you can comment on this. So that is really our action item that we hope our repeat customers and new guests tonight will do with us. So with that, we are going to start off with Raya Salter as our first speaker. Raya Salter, you might know her online as Climate Auntie, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see her better. She is an energy justice movement attorney, activist, author, and founder and an executive director of the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center based in New Rochelle. That policy center is focused on building grassroots power and youth leadership for environmental justice and community leadership for green and clean infrastructure. Raya is a member of the New York State Climate Action Council, an adjunct professor at Cardozo Law School, and the author of Energy Justice. She has over 15 years of energy regulatory experience, both in private practice and for NGOs, including the New York Renews Coalition, NRDC, and the Environmental Defense Fund. Raya has testified twice before Congress on matters of environmental justice and went viral after standing her ground against the GOP during a big oil hearing. So Raya, thank you so much for making time to be with us tonight. I'm really excited to hear from you.
Hello, everybody. It is so great to be here. Thanks for the intro. It's fantastic, and it saves me a couple of slides too. And I'm thrilled to be here, and I know that we are talking state strategies, but I think my presentation also kind of centers on, it kind of starts with the federal and then ends with the state. So I'm hoping that, but it's specifically energy, environmental, and climate justice. So I hope it will do the trick for folks' expectations here. And can everybody hear me? All right. You never have to worry about me going over. Please hit up Climate Auntie on Instagram. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Winning our future, not resisting or fighting. We will win our future. Federal and state strategies for environmental and climate justice and community mobilization. That's what I wanted to talk to you about this evening. Now, Courtney already said all the things, so I don't really need to talk about myself in my bio, but you can check out my organization's website, Energy Justice Law and Policy Center, ejlpc.org, and see all the cute things we do together. Also with WAS, as we're trying to shut down this ridiculous incinerator. You heard about my congressional testimony. But I mention it because I had to mention the federal because it's become a whole entire personality trait at this point. We have to speak truth to power to the industry, the oligarchs, and what's going on. So briefly, we'll talk about the federal threat. We'll talk about fighting back. We'll talk about New York State advocacy and leadership, and a little about where we are, which I think is actually the most important part. All right. So folks are watching the news, you see what's going on. This is really going to zero in more on, what's going on specifically in climate and energy, environmental justice. Billions of dollars from key programs, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which I'll talk about later, are being held back. Not only those, through illegal freezes, clawbacks, threats of criminal investigations, anything they can do to stop progress. And of course, the big thing happening now, I'm sure we'll hear about it later. We're paying attention to the budget issues that are happening now in Congress, devastating cuts across the board. And of course, we have to stand up and fight. We are seeing attacks, successful attacks on our core environmental laws. The Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. We've already seen the Supreme Court starting to chip away at the Clean Water Act just a few weeks ago. We know we've got a sympathetic Supreme Court in terms of taking down EPA and environmental regulations. And we are seeing agencies dismantled section by section. They want to delete entire agencies, but they're shutting programs down. They're doing mass firings, and of course, doing everything they can as soon as they can to roll back as many environmental regulations as possible. Environmental justice, climate, community, women. These are all part of the big balls Elon keywords, right? They're going to be using AI against us to slash our programs and stop our advocacy. It's not cute. It's not cute at all. We saw this before with the orange guy #1, and it was bad. It really is much worse now. It's worse. All right. So how do we start fighting back? The crap is unpopular. It's just unpopular. And just for, one way to look at it, I'll show you. I hope I had my links ready. You know, it's just hard sometimes to get to be, um, how do I get out of here so I can show you my links? All right. I bet you're now seeing my screen, but what I wanted to link, which I wanted to share with you, this is, and I'm going to talk a bit about it too. Oh, well, I should have asked. You know what? I'll just share my links at the end because I really meant for them to share them while I was speaking, but I think that's going to be challenging to give the presentation. So I'll share the links at the end. But we've got in New York alone over $3 billion invested in over 1,000 projects. Our universities, our national labs, our local organizations, and these cuts that are happening to the climate, energy, and environmental programs are going to create big holes in our state budgets that will so because all of our agencies, our state and local governments rely on this funding too. So we're going to see real threats to jobs, public health, local services, and that's just the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. So here's one of these fact sheets, showing this $3 billion and how many projects are here in New York State. And if you thought that was a lot of this money intentionally, unsuccessfully, actually went to swing states. Look at Michigan. Over $5 billion in projects just from the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law that are at risk here. This stuff is popular. People want this stuff. These GOP reps will say they hate this, and they will be right there at the ribbon cutting. So how do we fight back on this unpopular crap? We need to make sure that our representatives know that these specific programs are at risk and encourage them to fight. We need to do that through sharing personal local stories about how this is hitting us. I will share at the end. I'm going to share an advocacy toolkit, a really excellent advocacy toolkit just on these particular investments alone, put together by an organization I work with called I'm associated with, called Evergreen Action. I'm going to put that in the chat after I speak. We need to really focus in on this near-term fight with the budget that's happening in Congress right now. We need to support our lawsuits, these lawsuits that are pushing back, which are really sort of one of our most potent weapons. But here's the really key point about fighting back. Let's not reinvent the wheel or the bus. Now is time to get with our people. If you're upset about this, be it WAS, be it your Indivisible, your NYCD 16s, all our friends, let's build resource banks on all these topics. As we work with our local and national regional groups, people are smart. They have put together all types of stuff. Let's put these resource banks together, Let's get our advocacy tight. Let's walk each other's paper into the room when we go. Let's make sure all our topics get addressed. That's really the key thing. The toolkits, the advocacy, it's everything we need to deploy strategies really is out there. Now, let's talk about New York State in the context of this. We have to be the model that we need. New York State needs to be standing up robust and strong against this administration and for climate action. And that means doing the things that are promised right here and not backtracking. Our problem is that we've seen lagging implementation of our Climate Act, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. We have to get these languishing air permits addressed. We need to get a cap and invest program that the governor, has been slow to put forward. We need to make sure it's equitable. We got to start dismantling this fossil fuel infrastructure. And there's a whole host of regulatory and legal changes that need to move forward. And word on the street is that there are a few organizations that are planning to sue the Hochul administration because they have delayed on implementing our climate law. So look out for that. And look, this crew knows, right? We've got a bunch of stuff that we work together on to get passed. We need our bottle bill, our repackaging bill. We need New York heat. We got to say no Con Ed rate hikes. The context here is we need to reclaim the affordability narrative. That is what is killing us in New York State. We need to really show that climate action will save us money in the short term and the long term. We need to support our local progressive policy. We need to be pushing our local municipalities, our state and our local governments to take progressive action. It's all about seeing things happen on the ground where we are and forcing that to happen. We need our folks to be leaders, and we need the governor to stand up for climate, implement our law, and stand up to the Trump administration. Not afraid. We are standing up on climate and against this total nonsense. And again, let's get on the bus, not reinvent the wheel. We've got smart advocates. You're going to hear more from them tonight. We've got the toolkits. What we need to build is the people power. We need to get out there sooner rather than later. And this is the part that I really wanted to emphasize. Where are we right now? We are in the fight of our lives. The harder and earlier we strike back, the better. We can push back this ridiculous threat to our lives and livelihoods. We need to push now. We need to build people power. And environmentalists, hear me now. Our fight for the environment is inseparable for broader struggles. Housing, healthcare, trans rights, immigrant rights, racial justice, they are coming for us too. We have to build strong, secure, and united communities. Don't go it alone. Clink up, link up, put our resources to work. I don't need to reiterate all the state strategies because all together we got them. We meet every other night of the week and talk about them, don't we? I know folks on this call. We need enhanced security protocols. If you need a guide, contact me. There are guides out there. We need to be using encrypted communication, moving to more secure communications. Look, this is just from yesterday, right? The FBI is coming for us. This article is about how we know we're going to see a weaponized FBI come after, Black Lives Matter. We know immigrants, but they are coming. They are coming for us. If there's a pecking order, trust and believe we are on it. Why? Why? If you have a set, put it in the chat. I'll give you doom, 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 doom. Because we are facing down the fossil fuel industry, okay? That is number one with who is in power right now. We are on the pecking order. We are next. We have to fight back now and hard as fast as possible so we can push back on this threat. And I will stop my share because I'm sure out of time. Now that my hat is off, completely off from my 501c3, I'm going to put a hat on and say that there is a new Climate Justice Voters 501c4 that is being started. I'll put the link there too. Please, the website, just getting started, but enter your name in there. We need to build people power. We have all the strategies. We have all the tools. we need to build people power. And that's what I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Raya. That was an excellent way to start. I just want to say that our county executive just joined, so I'm gonna like just vamp for a minute and give him a second to get himself together and hopefully turn on his camera so we know you're ready, county executive. I saw your name in the chat. So we will go to Ken Jenkins, our new county executive. If you are ready, county executive, you can come off mute and start speaking. I don't know if you want to turn on your camera or not.
I'm going to try to turn on my camera in a second because while I'm not driving, I'm in the car, but I'm going to do that and see if we can get the lights on here. Oh no, I look dark. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. I don't have good lighting. Right. All right. So you're gonna have to say. I'm gonna say hi, and then I'm gonna go off camera. So.
Okay. Thanks for joining.
And again, first, let me say, Courtney. First, I appreciate when you and I saw each other up in Peekskill, and then it was actually in Ossining, and then reaching out and saying, hey, we'd love to have you come on and talk a little bit about what things are happening from the county level as we're trying to deal with the continual challenges day after day with our federal government, and how do we continue to move forward on the environmental issues when we watch things like today, the Department of Education wiping out basically the Civil Rights Division and then saying we're going to try to get rid of every DEI position, and we want to take away words like environmental justice. And I want to put it in framework of what we started with today. What we started with today, at least for me, the third thing that I was at today, or second thing I was at today, was Hazel Duke's funeral, right? And it was a reminder for me, but it's a reminder for all of us. That the warriors that are in all of us, and here specifically for you and Was, the climate justice warriors, that, you know, this time, this energy, this effort, we need to make sure that we are putting in, and we're not getting tired. We're not getting, we're not getting in a position where we're like, all right, we're just going to just sit around and wait for 2 years. We can't afford to do that. The folks now in Washington are determined to make sure that government can't work. They're determined to make sure that that any programs that seem to have uplifted and to be able to give opportunity to others is eliminated. And what I'm saying to you and for all of our folks at the meeting I just came out of, I just said the same thing, which is we have to be in a position that our allies, we know who our allies are, but we also need to give grace to our allies when they're not with us 100% of the time. And L. Joy Williams, who is the New York State NAACP president now, following Hazel Duke's 40 years as the New York State president, said today, and some of you, and I apologize for those of you that heard her say this, which is, you know, her initial experience with Dr. Duke was not positive, right? Because she was young and younger when she came in from the youth in the youth chapter, youth and college chapter, and then moved into the Brooklyn chapter. And you know what? And this is what she said. I'm just paraphrasing what she said, which is they were not on the same page. And she said no a lot. And Hazel said no a lot and said, you know what? I'm always going to be able to defend your position, even when I don't agree with it. And that's one of the things we have to continue to do together. So I know that from a county perspective, we are not perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but we're going to work as hard as we can with our allies. And we feel our allies are people like in WAS. So we're going to continue to do that work together. And in this time with a federal government where Lee Zeldin said we're going to get rid of programs that have any environmental justice connections at all. and we don't want to work on any programs, and we're going to eliminate those programs that have been trying to make sure that there's equity in health outcomes and doing all those things. We have to work together. And again, we're not perfect, and we're going to keep doing that together. So, so Courtney, I wanted to start with that, and then certainly open up to any questions our friends and WASP may have on the things that we're going to continue to do. So we in Westchester are not backing off our commitment to working with all of our partners. And again, whether we're perfect or not, we're not going to be perfect, but we're always going to be able to be accessible and listen. And even when people don't say things that we like, we're going to be able to sit there and talk with our friends and say, you know what, let's have grace and let's make sure that we're being civil as we're doing that. Not saying that it's not with you specifically. It's never been that way. It's never been that way with Raya or anyone else that's on this phone or on the Zoom. I didn't look at the list of people that are participating, but that has never been the case ever over the 30, 40 years of work that I've done in Westchester County as an activist, as a political person, as a friend to our community, and we're always going to fight for that.
Yes, thanks. Folks are applauding if you can't see on your phone. I think one question, well, one thing, I guess, WAS is lucky because our priority, while it's environmental justice for Peekskill, moving away from the incinerator is fiscally responsible too. And we know the Trump administration loves its money. So there's jobs to be created in zero waste solutions. So do you have any specific priorities in your administration? I know, like, you just, for those who maybe aren't local, our previous county executive was elected to Congress, and Ken was the deputy county executive, now ascended to county executive through a special election. So does your administration have any specific environmental priorities that you are committed to pushing through, like, regardless of what's going to be happening on the federal level?
Absolutely. And again, yeah, from one of the benefits for me, and it's been a benefit for me, is that being deputy county executive for 7 years in 2018 and competing against George in 2017 for the particular position of county executive, that we're working on all of those same items that we continue to do. One is to make sure that we're figuring out the whole permit scenario, the title, Article 5, I want to say Article 5, maybe Title 5, title up in the Wheelabrator plant and being able to deal with that. I keep saying, and what I've been told by our DEF professionals, Department of Environmental Facilities professionals, that we need to continue to do everything to reduce waste. We've done our food scraps. We worked with our local municipalities in trying to make sure that we're getting less things there. We have done textile recycling. We're going to continue to do that. We have plants in Westchester where we're trying to get up to 1,000 trees, and we're going to keep doing that. But more importantly, we're trying to keep investing in all of those facilities, whether those are our wastewater recovery facilities, or whether those are plants like the Wheelabrator plant, to try to reduce our reliance on them altogether. We continue to understand we're a client, a customer. We're not the only customer, and if we stop bringing that, we'll do that. But I keep the weekend to make sure that we're protecting our friends.
So county executive, I think we're losing you. Maybe turning off your video would help.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But yes, we're continuing. One of the benefits, again, for me is that I helped build this team, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's been a seamless transition, to see that we've been able to continue to move forward and show stability, show competence, and more importantly, some civility as we move forward in the administration. My administration, there's two people that changed. One of them was Ellen Hendricks that went with Congressman Latimer. And the other one, I just had to move with our new Veteran Service Agency, which was a focus for me to try to make sure that we were speaking to veterans that were younger, and younger in our case meant under 75, right? Because we need to do that. We're going to continue to invest in mental health, mental health services, and for an environmental perspective, the lead for me is working with our flooding and concerns and connecting those to housing. And when I could do those two pieces, housing on one side with flooding and challenges that we have around the county, as well as on the other side with mental health and creating supportive housing wherever those happen to be based on the data from our Project Alliance, I feel strongly that we're going to be able to address some of the concerns that are more environmental as an environmental justice perspective without the federal government's help at all. So we're going to keep working on those. We're going to start seeing projects. The governor's office told us that that they should have been rolled out already. So I'm expecting it any day now that we're going to roll out. The governor's going to roll out the first set of environmental issues, environmental projects from the Environmental Bond Act that was passed several years ago to address some of the problems that we have. So.
Thank you. So there was two quick questions in the chat. One was, let me scroll back up to find it. Do you know anything about the NYSERDA grants to set up curbside EV charging stations? Yonkers is advocating for those.
Yes, we do know about those. So again, it was two things. I want to say two budgets ago, that would have been in our 24 budget, that we put in $5 million for EV charging stations and with municipal partners. And we just flat out hadn't been able to get those dollars out the door because for two reasons. One is because my law department made things a little bit challenging because they didn't want us to give away things and said it was a gift, which it really wasn't. But it took us a little while to get through that. And then the second thing was NYSERDA making modifications in what an EV charging station standard had to be. So they made it a standard. We went out and did an RFP. We selected a Flow to be our company, and then we made sure that all the municipalities can buy into the prices that we were able to get, and then they were able to partner with the $5 million from the county, the NYSERDA dollars, so that it basically made it free for the local municipality. They changed the standards and we had to go out and rebid. We tried to fight through that and say, hey, we have 600 charging stations that have been allocated for our money, and the state, the PSC in this case, said no, you need to get to these new standards, which for the cars, there were 2 cars that were eligible for it, and none of our charging stations. So we're working with that now. What we had directed what we directed our law department to do with Public Works and Pete McCart from Energy and Sustainability to say, you know what, we don't need to wait for everyone's local municipality to get this stuff done. Let's get these individual agreements down to the Board of Legislators. Yes, it's more work for the Board of Legislators, but I've been a legislator. I know it's not that much more work. There's more work for our law department. So what? We pay them a lot of money to do that, and the Bond Act to do that, to get those out the door so people don't lose their money, the NYSERDA grant portions to do that. So yes, we're going to get those money out the door. I'm expecting that's going to happen in the next week or two because those agreements, I started seeing them come up in front of me for a signature to send down to the Board of Legislators.
Thanks so much for that. We have time for one more, and this was from Laura Perkins asking, do you know anything about how crypto may affect the grid? Is the county keeping an eye on this? And I know the county just entered into the rate case against Con Edison's rate hikes, but NYSEG might also be involved. So are you keeping an eye on this?
So one, we are keeping an eye on it. And again, between Pete McCart and Elijah Reichlin-Melnick, Elijah is the person that is named for us to be the person intervening that'll be involved in the rate case. NYSEG hasn't filed their rate case yet. When they file their rate case, I suspect we're going to take the same action with NYSEG inside of Westchester County. in Westchester County. But yes, we're watching the crypto. But one of the challenges, and I like to think I'm a techie person since my degree is in computer science and information systems, and most people know that, I like to think I'm a techie guy. Crypto, I'm like, what? How does that work? I don't understand. All right. So again, we're working through that, and we know that for an energy perspective, yes, the crypto and watching how those are working at the various plants throughout the state is going to be a challenge. And again, because what's happening at the federal government is, they're quote unquote flooding the zone. They're making changes and they're trying to just make people get frustrated, throw up their hands and not pay attention anymore. And we can't do that. So that's why we need our partners. We need every ally together, standing together, understanding that there's never a place where everyone's going to agree 100% of the time. But we need to work together on this because we know those folks don't have anything good for us at all.
All right, and I'm going to bother you for one more just because I can't say no to Sue from Yonkers, our curbside compost champion. She's asking, do you have plans to expand curbside food scraps pickup in Westchester? Lots of question marks and exclamation points.
Yes. So the way that and someone asked about this in a different community. I won't shout them out only because someone gonna shout them out anyway. So Cortland asked us about this. Rich Becker, the supervisor in Cortland, asked us about this, and we said what we did several years ago to encourage curbside pickup of food scraps was to say to the municipality that the tipping fee, how much do they pay when they get to the MRF, to the materials recycling facility, and doing their tipping, is going to be the same as their regular trash. So what we said is we made it super convenient, even though it cost us, the county, more to deal with food scrap waste. We said for the municipalities to encourage the use of curbside pickup to do that. In Portland's case and some other municipalities' cases, what they have been able to do is put some dollars together to be able to purchase the kind of trash machines, trash machines and trucks to be able to do curbside pickup. And what we continue to do is work with our friends. Pete McCart keeps trying to identify different sources where we could go out and provide those food scrap containers for free to people. So we're trying to figure that out, working with our municipal partners to be able to provide those. So we're not charging anything because, again, in most of the local municipalities that want to do the food scrap recycling, they charge you for whatever kits that they have because they want to make sure that you're really going to use it. I'm like, that if we want people to do food scrap recycling, why don't we figure out a way to make those free and give them to people so that they can be encouraged to do that. And we're going to keep utilizing our facilities to be able to do demonstrations for those local municipalities to show how this is such a great thing and be able to respond when things come from WAS or any other our environmental partners that are out there to say, hey, why don't you try this? We're going to try it. Right, and see how it goes. But yes, for us, we have encouraged that curbside happening, but most of the challenge happens to be with the local municipality to figure out how they deal with their trucks to separate, to source separate, and without making an additional run.
All right. Thank you so much, County Executive. We really appreciate you making the time to come on, and we are looking forward to keeping progress going on all of these issues despite the lack of support from the feds. So thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, I appreciate you, Courtney. All right, take care, Watson. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. All right, and our next speaker, we're giving preference to our electeds because we keep them very busy. So our next speaker that we're going to go to is Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg. I am lucky enough to call her, or for her to be my assembly member. And we work on stuff together all the time. And she's really been a climate champion and a champion of the environment back when she was working for Sandy Galiff, all the way through to now that she's in that seat and has that title. Thank you so much for making time for us again tonight. And I'm looking forward to hearing how you are going to have the state pushing back against the federal government's lack of environmental priorities and giving us our marching orders on what we can do to empower you to get that done. So take it away, Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you so much to WAS and to all of the environmental advocates who are on the call this evening. Even in times like these, we really need to hold on to our vision of what it is that we want instead of just fighting against that which we don't want. And that's what's so important. And I'm so grateful to all of you for keeping up the good fight and being on tonight. So much that we won't even matter if we don't have habitable planet. And as many of you know, I've been talking about my mission for many years, building healthy communities that are environmentally healthy, economically healthy, physically and mentally healthy, all through the lens of equity. All of these words that don't seem to ring true with our the orange man. Anyway, I don't say his name. Especially like in a place like the Hudson Valley, where we're blessed with beautiful landscapes, having an environment that people can enjoy is also the basis of our tourist economy and our recreation, and it has a special impact on our economic, physical, and mental health when we have a healthy environment, which is why I always put the environment first in my little mission statement. So I'm going to continue to push for stronger laws to protect the environment and to promote resiliency in the face of climate change that's already happening. I always say it's already late, as we all know on this call. We haven't done enough. I mean, just today, there was I can't even say it with a straight face. There was a debate on putting EV charging infrastructure in place in multifamily buildings, requiring it. And there had been a chapter amendment which was being debated. And the hypocrisy coming out of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the debate was just shocking, from complaining about the dangers of electric vehicle batteries in accidents, and how they light on fire. Okay, the number of fires that have been caused by batteries versus gas fires it's just amazing to me. That I mean, that was just like the tip of the iceberg. I could go on and on, but the frustration is really palpable here up in Albany, dealing with these petty arguments for why we, half the time they're talking to us about why we can't continue to demand electrification because we don't have the infrastructure. And then when we want to put the infrastructure in place, they say, well, we can't do that because it's not safe, or it's not this, or it's not that, or we don't have the energy, or where are you getting this from, or where are you getting that from? There's always something for them to debate against why moving forward with electrification doesn't make sense. And we just keep fighting on, and we will continue to fight on. We're obviously in the midst of our budget negotiations right now. We just produced our one house, which we will be voting on. And I've been fighting to get New York Heat into our one house budget, which we didn't get, but now I have to go back to my notes for a second. We did get a couple $100 million in for the energy affordability program under the Public Service Commission, and $330 million for the Empower Plus program. And I was told that those were sort of placeholders for money that would be needed for New York Heat. As you may or may not know, our speaker does not like having policy in our one house or in the budget period. So we're constantly crossing out policy, even if we agree with it, and we're told that that needs to be debated outside of the budget, which is why we don't put things like New York Heat, which is a big policy big policy bill in our one house budget. But I was told that that these monies might be placeholders for something. So I'm slightly hopeful, and I know the Senate did include it, and so therefore there's hope that it's still going to be on the table for negotiation. The other thing that I was fighting for was more money for the Environmental Protection Fund. We did get, I believe, another 100 million, and we were also fighting for more money for food scrap recycling. We got another, I think, 1 million added to the 5 million. So now we're up to 6 million for the food composting program. We did get another 2 million for the Hudson River Estuary program that Senator Harcum and I fought for, and also the Mohawk Valley, I think it was the Mohawk Reservoir. And the Hudson River Estuary Program funds capital grants for river access and resilience, and education grants for communities throughout the Hudson River Valley. So again, you know, we're chipping away. We also there was another, and just to say, it was 500 million for Environmental Protection Fund and 600 million for the clean water infrastructure. I had been hoping to get money for engineering planning grants for drinking water infrastructure, which I was fighting hard for, to get that money, because a lot of the money that is in there for the drinking water infrastructure out of the clean water infrastructure program isn't getting out the door because communities don't have the ability to do the engineering part of it that you need to do, so you can apply for the grant money to get the infrastructure improvements, the money for the infrastructure improvements that you need. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg, a catch-22. And I was trying to get this money in specifically for this, and unfortunately was not able to get that money. So we're just going to have to keep working on that in other ways and find creative ways. So we're definitely facing an uphill battle with federal funding and an uncertain political climate. I think that we need to just keep holding our congressional representatives' feet to the fire, tell them what we need here in Westchester County, what we need here in Lower Hudson Valley, what we need here in New York State. You know, we have a number of events coming up. We're also fighting against Project Maple. We have an event coming up. Is it this week or next week now? I can't remember, but it's in the next 2 weeks. We'll be up in Peekskill outside of City Hall, and we're going to continue all the work that we can do. I always say, you know, it's like a Liechtenstein. We just have to throw all the paint at the canvas. I still really believe that in terms of what we need to do to save our communities from the onslaught of climate change, save our Earth, make it better for our children, ourselves, because we don't have to wait that long for our children, our grandchildren. And yes, 6 million, I'm just like looking at some of these. Yes, Mohawk Watershed. Yes, thank you. And we're just going to keep fighting. Thanks, Acacia, for popping March 21st up into the chat. And we're talking about food composting programs. What's the state money? I'm trying to answer questions at the same time. Sorry, Courtney, do you want to take me through some of the questions, and then
Sure.
Okay, that would probably just be better, and I'll try to answer whatever I can. Okay.
All right.
And thank you again, all of you, for such great advocacy. I truly appreciate you. We couldn't do it without the advocates. Food and Water Watch, WAS, Zero Waste, Croton 100, Cure 100, and all of the groups, and my friends in local government. I see Nikki Armacost on there. I'm not sure who else, because I'm not seeing all the names, but I really appreciate all of you and everything that you do, and you're incredible advocates, and we can't do this alone.
Thank you. We are grateful for you. So one of the question was, let's see, we were just talking about food scraps composting programs. What is the state money you mentioned for that about? So like, who gets it? What
I think that it's for grants. It's again, it's part of environmental planning. There are grants for things like those bins that we talked about. It's possible if I think I know that we were talking a little bit earlier about Cortland wanting to do curbside pickups for food scraps, and they do need, I think, 2 trucks. It's possible that that could be used for an electric truck to pick up food scraps. It is possible that the money could be used for staffing the pickup. Most of the time it's for capital though. So like the bins, if we wanted to, you know, if one of the communities wanted to distribute bins, it's, you know, it could be used for that, I believe. And also the bigger bins, if you need to collect into bigger bins, which some of the localities who aren't doing curbside still might need to add some of the bigger composting bins for collection.
All right. That was it for
education.
questions from.
Sorry, and education. It could be used for education, right? Which is another big part of it. And I know that, you know, when I was town supervisor in Ossining, we partnered with T-Town to do education. I know there other communities partnered with the Greenberg Nature Center to do education and outreach. You know, certainly if school districts are interested, I believe that they would also be eligible.
All right. Thank you so much. That's it for questions from the chat. I think a lot of accolades and praise and gratitude in there for you. So thanks so much for making the time as usual. And
just to add one more thing, I think that we are also going to have another, we might also be hosting an event in Peekskill on the 21st, a day of action against talking to our congressional representative, Mike Lawler, on, I believe also on March 21st, also in Peekskill. I think that they're going to be back to back, and I think it's going to be 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. I'm pretty sure. That might not be
awesome.
Definite. Yeah. But
yeah, Acacia just put the link to the 11 a.m. one in there. So if anybody on here has the 10 a.m. one, feel free to pop more info in the chat.
Thanks, Acacia. And thank you again, Courtney. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dana. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. So we are, thank you to our other speakers for being patient so we could accommodate our elected officials. And our next speaker is going to be Shay O'Reilly. He is the campaign manager for Spring Street Climate Fund. Shay came to Spring Street following 7 years as an organizer for the Sierra Club. He learned organizing as part of movements for economic justice and poverty abolition, and has also served as a steward and elected representative in a labor union. I know Shay from fighting the Algonquin pipeline expansion here in Peekskill, for which I am eternally grateful to him. And I invited him because of his kind of sort of unique role that I'm sure he will tell you about, and to talk about financial strategies, like how do we use money and our capitalist system to make change to that system. So Shay, take it away.
Thank you, Courtney. Let me share my slides. All right, here we are. Okay, great. Also, it's funny that you said you're grateful to me, because I'm really grateful to you, because I learned so much from you and from that fight together, and I'm glad to be back with you in this context. So I'm talking about financial strategies today. I'll take a minute to kind of describe what I do and who I am. And I'll start by saying that I have a lot of secondhand exposure to corporate campaigning, financial campaigning, divestment work, stuff like that. I did help pass a divestment resolution through my the Lutheran Metropolitan New York Synod passed a divestment resolution for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So I was involved directly in that. But in my current role at Spring Street Climate Fund, we are a small nonprofit that does some fundraising work and some re-granting work and also some programmatic work. And I mostly work on the programmatic side, but I'm also exposed all the time. We're a small operation, so I'm exposed all the time to our fundraising operations and some of our re-granting work as well. And so what I have to offer is mostly me as a private citizen, kind of speaking about my context and my experience working in the kind of financial space. And please don't take it as like the official position of Spring Street Climate Fund. But we'll just go from there. And I want to start by kind of grounding us in like when we talk about financial strategies, we're talking about money, right? And money brings up a lot of feelings for people depending on your background, the stories that you have in your heart about money. Sometimes it helps people think about exclusion or inclusion. You don't have enough money, or you do have enough money to be part of this group. Sometimes people think about it on the axis of purity and filth, right? Like something is pure if it's not monetized, and it's dirty if it is monetized. And people also think about it in terms of scarcity and enablement, right? Like I don't have enough money, and so that puts me in a place of precarity, or I have the money that I can do these things that I like to do. I want to like hold that because I think that everybody's coming from a different set of histories with money. They're coming from different class experiences. And when we talk about money, not only are those aspects of justice worked into it, but also all of these different narratives and feelings and stories that we've talked about for so long. I want to acknowledge too that for most of us, the vast majority of us, monetary strategies are going to be secondary to the rest of our activism work. Money is an incredibly undemocratically allocated resource, right? It's not like votes or each get one. People have money on a very, very unequal scale. And recently there was a report coming out that shows that in America, 50% of consumer spending is done by the ultra rich. Like the top 5% of earners. And so what that means is that the consumer power that we have on this call, all of us, most of us are not going to be in that 5%. And so we're making up a much smaller proportionate amount of that spending. But that doesn't mean it's meaningless, right? Like your conscientious approach to money can help shape you and your activism. And also good projects need funding, right? Like you have to find funding to do a lot of this work because we live in a capitalist society where we all have to work in order to survive and to live and to eat and to, pay for daycare and all that other stuff. So with those kind of grounding assumptions, I'll launch into how I'm thinking about strategies that relate to money in this time. Let's start off by the most obvious one, right? Like personal finances and home economics. Major banks lend to polluting projects. That just happens. You can find a lot about this, whether you're looking at JP Morgan Chase, whether you're looking at Wells Fargo. They lend to mines, they lend to fossil fuel infrastructure projects, they lend to incinerators. All of these projects to build and operate need financing from major banks. They need help from insurance companies as well. And this is the network in which they operate. That means that when you have your savings in a bank, your savings are also helping that bank lend to these companies in order to get a return on their capital. The same is the case with your retirement accounts, right? I'll drop a link in the chat here from the Yale Climate Connections program. Actually, let's see if I can find the chat again now that I'm screen sharing. I may not be gifted enough to do that. I'll come back to it afterward. But a lot of our 401ks are tied up in funds that invest strongly in these polluting indexes, basically, and in all of these polluting industries. So our large funds often support, whether it's pollution, companies engaged in their human rights abuses. There's no such thing as a truly pure investment, right? Like we know that exploitation is sort of rife in our system, but there are ways in which our funds can at least not directly support the industries that are killing our planet. So there are a bunch of resources that are out there in the world of corporate campaigning and financial campaigning to help you move your money out of these industries. Stop the Money Pipeline is a big one that's been working to try and stop financing of fossil fuel infrastructure. Their guide to greener banks is actually down. Their website doesn't work in that capacity, but they do have a really great resource on their website about the process of moving your money from one bank to another. And then you can go to bank.green, which lists greener banking options. A lot of those are going to be your local credit unions. I bank with a credit union. It does everything I need. We also have Amalgamated Bank, which is connected with some large labor unions. These are banks that have made kind of pledges or structured their investments that they're not furthering destructive investments in extraction, essentially. And then there's also fossilfreefunds.org, which is dedicated towards 401ks, retirement accounts, stuff like that. There are resources, especially if you operate a company that, or you're kind of a higher up in a company that has an investment account offer for your employees. This is a good way to start figuring out how you can move that from a polluting 401k to one that's less involved in pollution. But I want to encourage you, if you're looking at making these changes and you do actually make them, you should talk about it publicly, right? Like you're one person. It's great to make these changes. And also, you can have much more of an impact if you are public with your decision and you have that conversation. And I actually think this is a conversation that people are curious about, right? Like you can have it over brunch one day with your friends and say, like, oh, well, how's it going? Oh, I actually just like went through this process to move my money from this fund to this fund. It was, a pain in these ways, but I feel much better about it going to these kinds of projects. That's something that is a really good avenue for talking about the ways in which we use money in a way that doesn't necessarily feel like a direct attack on people's spending choices or habits, right? Like most of us don't think about where we bank. We just look at the kind of rates that we get, the interest rates, stuff like that. This is a way of starting to have that conversation where you can model that kind of greater responsibility for how we're operating within this financialized system. I also want to acknowledge that right now, Raya talked a lot about the ways that our current administration is really targeting uh, any attempt to act on climate. This is not limited just to policy. It's also going on in this investment space. So ESG stands for environmental and social governance. It's been around for over a decade now. This is just the idea that if you are a major investor, you should be taking into account environmental and social good causes, basically, and making sure that your investments are doing kind of well by the world as well as possible. Actually, interestingly, ESG funds have typically outperformed standard investment funds. So the S&P ESG index actually outperformed the standard one by 15% over 10 years. And then some of that is because companies that are involved in ESG, right, like they're taking a more holistic approach than simply what maximizes immediate shareholder value. Ironically, that ends up actually increasing the value to shareholders over time. But Republicans are attacking this because it has an impact. They're concerned about, sorry, maybe I shouldn't be too partisan. The ruling party right now is attacking these because they have an impact on these fossil, these various kind of dirty polluting industries. They're seeing that not only is it affecting their finances, it's also starting to remove their social license to operate, the ways in which people don't think twice about having their money go towards a pipeline company or something like that, right? Like we're starting to challenge that, and they see that as a threat to their business model. And so what that means is that we're seeing cases brought in court. Usually they shop around for a federal court district that's going to be really sympathetic to these arguments. Reed O'Connor out of Texas issued one of these opinions that says that it's a violation of fiduciary duties for a 401k to consider anything but immediate and maximal investor returns. Again, we're still waiting to see how that plays out. That decision came down relatively recently in the last couple of months. I think there's a compelling case to be made on appeal that, again, ESG does often tend to return higher results. But I think also right now our economics are a little chaotic, shall we say. So there's a lot up in the air there. Another way of kind of engaging financially that's been kicking around a lot is sort of boycotts. I think about boycotts and sort of abstention and aligning your spending with your values in different ways. I think that there are products that are themselves harmful. There are companies that have harmful practices broadly. And I think you can always choose what's in line with your values. I think that there are a lot of reasons to abstain from shopping at a certain place or buying specific products that aren't in line with your values in this moment. For example, I've joined some of the Tesla takedown protests recently. I think that there's a lot of social opprobrium that's been targeted at Tesla. Many folks bought their Tesla way before they knew that Elon Musk was going to do this. That's totally fine. Thank you for the time check. I do think that, we can give a nice thumbs down to the Cybertruck we see rolling down the street. But I think that a classic boycott is a form of collective action and has a demand, a duration, a constituency that can support it in community, and a recommended alternative. My sort of rule of thumb with thinking about whether something is a real effective boycott is whether the entity being boycotted can actually call somebody on the phone and negotiate over the boycott or not, right? A couple places to consider spending your money when you need to buy goods and services: secondhand stores, minority and women-owned business enterprises. New York has a directory, worker cooperatives, B Corps, unionized stores. These all have various pluses and drawbacks, but definite things to consider. And then also like donating to good causes, right? This is another way that we spend our money in line with our values. Recurring donations allow for long-term planning, which is really helpful. You can think about giving as one way of being part of the work of an organization. So giving to an organization you also volunteer with is another way of being invested in that group and its success. In my personal donation plan, I split my donations between charity groups that provide direct help and advocacy groups, and I prioritize groups that are doing real work to build grassroots power and where my small contribution will really be noticed. You should also consider how much tax exemption matters for you. People donate to 501c3s for the tax exemption a lot of the time, but if you're donating various amounts of money, you might also find that donating to a C4 or a directly political entity can take your values further. Finally, a plug that the New York Attorney General's office has a really good page on making sure that your donation is reaching the right people and avoiding scams. People take advantage of people who are feeling charitable, unfortunately, and so it's always good to double check. And then finally, one note on how state and local policymakers can take on financial strategies if we make them. Again, nothing happens because people see it and think it's a nice idea out of the goodness of their heart. There's a lot of priorities facing even well-intentioned lawmakers, and we have to make sure that this rises to the top. So one, I see it in the chat right here, is public banking. There's been a proposal to have a New York public bank for a while. This would allow us to invest those deposited funds in more socially useful endeavors. New York City has public matching funds for political campaigns. So that means that when I donate to my preferred mayoral candidate as a resident of New York City, I get 8-to-1. I get an 8-to-1 match on that out of public coffers, up to a certain amount, right? We're not matching, Ron Lauder's donation of $8 million to Andrew Cuomo, but we're matching small donations so that kind of people like me can really actually have an effect on those races. Other campaigns like divestment of public pension funds really matter. And then finally, there are opportunities to push for contracting standards that consider unionized workplaces, worker-owned businesses, and minority and women-owned business enterprises. And that's my presentation. I will figure out if I can stop sharing my screen now. I'm sorry. I feel suddenly like I'm inept on Zoom. I don't know if there was an update or something, and it's giving me trouble, but let me see what I can do.
No worries. We were able to see slides and everything, and dropping the links all in one message makes it easier for us to get them, and we can email them out to everybody afterwards.
Excellent.
So thank you so much, Shay. Very much appreciate that, because I think there's a lot of info that most of us don't think about or know enough about. So compiling it all in one place was really useful. Our next speaker is going to be Jessica Roth from Gaia, which stands for Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Jessica has been fighting for more than 12 years against climate change and for a sustainable, just energy system, working to stop fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure build-out, and supporting frontline struggles like the one in Peekskill against the Algonquin pipeline. Prior to her work in the climate movement, Jessica practiced law for a decade, focusing on civil rights and federal Indian law. She is based in so-called Brooklyn, occupied Lenape, Muncie, Canarsie lands, where she was born and raised. And so with that, I would like to hand it over to Jessica from Gaia. Go ahead, Jess.
I can promise you I am inept at PowerPoint, but we'll see what happens. This is my first time sharing my own slides, friends, so we'll see how it goes. Wow. That one, right? Oh, I can do it where I can see. I'm sorry, I'm figuring this all out right now. And I don't know how to do it. What do I have to here? Sorry. See, I live up to my promises of poor screen showing. There we go. Hopefully. Loading. Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
we got it. We can see it.
Oh, go back to the beginning. Okay. Hi. Sorry. As I mentioned, this is the first time I've actually shared my own slides. So there you go. As Courtney said, I'm Jessica Roth. I work for Gaia. For those of you who don't know Gaia, we are a global network of more than 1,000 organizations in 92 countries working towards a zero waste and environmental justice systems. We engage on issues at the local and at the national and at the international level. And we obviously are in all regions of the world. So I actually work on everything from local site fights to federal, I joke, I go from the street corner basically to the White House and everywhere in between. Although obviously my access to the White House is definitely different and limited now. So we are involved in a lot of different international negotiations. That's a section of the work that I've been engaged in. Other of my colleagues work on like the climate COPs, and there's the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal. And I'm working on the Global Plastics Treaty. Which we have something of a unique perspective because of the fact that we are a global organization. We always center Global South voices, front and fence line and environmental justice voices. And so I'm pretty new to the global UN process on this. I've actually only been at Gaia for about 2.5 years myself. But because I work on plastics nationally, it's really important to be engaged in the international issue as well. Oh, I think I forgot to say that part, that I'm the Plastics and Petrochemicals Program Manager on the US and Canada program at Gaia. So this UN process for the Global Plastics Treaty is my frame for having this conversation about global issues that Courtney had asked me to speak about. The processes, as I'm sure most people are aware at the UN, are very slow and very long. I'll give you just like a quick kind of overview so you have an idea, but this process started in 2017 and was supposed to have been finished in December of 2024, and we are not finished yet. So there was the beginnings of discussions around plastics related to the marine environment, and then it kept expanding and expanding. And there was expert groups that did research, and then they finally put together a proposal at the United Nations Environmental Assembly and passed a resolution to work on an international instrument to end plastic pollution towards an international legally binding instrument, which would authorize them to work on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, and based on a comprehensive approach addressing the full life cycle of plastics. So this gets into so many different issues, which is why it's also that much more complicated, because as you all are aware, there are quite a number of petrostates that are heavily involved in causing problems in the UN processes, including our own. So as I said, the legally binding agreements are a very long process, and once they actually are complete, and then countries have to sign on, and in the United States, our process is then it has to go to Congress and be ratified by Congress. So I was sort of joking with my colleagues that, like, I'm going to talk about global strategies. Who knows what those really are? We're sort of figuring it out, right? We are all very new into this administration. To be fair, the last administration was also terrible. So even though I recognize that we are in a really critical position now and that we are escalating on all of the areas where the government is doing, terrible things and disempowering people and stripping rights and stepping away from responsibilities. President Biden called himself the, quote, environmental justice president. And I can tell you that that was not accurate. We were constantly arguing with the US government representatives. They were very, very not reflective of that commitment in the orders that they were given to be dealing with the negotiations. We had to work incredibly hard to move them just the slightest bit. And then anytime they made a little bit of a shift, they wanted, mass praise and couldn't understand why we were still criticizing them when we have in our delegations people who live in all of these front and fence line communities that are literally being poisoned every single day by the infrastructure that is dealing with either fossil fuel extraction or plastic creation or disposal or all of those other things. So, and also not surprising to anyone, there's massive conflicts of interest because industry has a huge role. We are all considered as observers, anyone who's not part of a national government, and everyone has equal footing. And then in the context of the UN, they talk about everyone as stakeholders, but obviously, a community that's surrounding a drill site or a ethane cracker plant where they make plastic is a very different kind of stakeholder than the CEO of Exxon. And unfortunately, the system puts them all in the same place. And there's actually a number of states, and by states, I mean international. Oh, sorry. I just realized, see, I told you I'm terrible at this, at the slides. Are you all seeing the plastic treaty now, part of it? Okay. Sorry, it said it was moving and it wasn't. So just to say that, with all the petroleum states in the room and representing, an equal sort of standing as stakeholders, then we have many, many problems in addressing, obviously, the government. We were having joint meetings with all of industry at one point, and then they started to separate us because we were being too aggressive for them. And there are a number of states that have their people from industry who are actually at the table with them as representatives of the state government. So that's also a really massive problem. But as you can see, plastic is a massive issue, obviously, all across the world. And there's all these different parts of the systems that it integrates into. And there's a lot of text on here. I can certainly share these with you later. But this is a really big, a big position. Sorry, this is a really big question because of all of the interconnectivity and how this is, but this is also in an area that none of the other multilateral agreements cover all of these pieces, right? And this deals with public health, and it deals with economics, and it deals with community welfare, and it deals with environment and climate and all of these other things. And regularly, even under the so-called Environmental Justice Administration, the government was telling us that they didn't have the authority to do anything, that there's always conflicts between the federal laws and the international laws, and because they bring federal agency representatives to represent to talk about and be experts on the federal laws, and they bring Department of State representatives to be the experts on the international law, they kind of point fingers at each other and never really come up with a clear answer. And so we've been dealing with this forever, for the entire time. And because they've been so obstructionist, we've basically been honing the skills that we've needed to deal with what's coming next, right? And because the processes are so incredibly slow moving, and because they're based on consensus, as we've seen in other situations, just the United States or 2 or 3 other groups can cause a complete shutdown. And in the Plastics Treaty, in fact, there's been a different group of, they call themselves the like-minded states, and it's like Saudi Arabia and Russia and Kuwait, and they've been slowly trying to obstruct and take up all the space all the time. So the key to the global stage is global pressure. And as you can see here, just like with any other situation, right? The most important thing is the building of power. And the unique thing about being in the international and the global sort of scale is that there's people from all different countries and issues and lived experiences and all different kinds of understandings and things that have worked and that haven't worked in their countries, as well as people who have been living under really repressive regimes as well. And so the broader the coalition, the more power that you have, and we can't let them divide us, which is what they're constantly trying to do, pit different interests against each other. So we have both a US coalition and a global coalition so that we can address all of these issues and bring as much strength to the table as possible. And so it's also really important because in these kinds of situations, you have access to governments in ways that you never would before, whether they're your own or whether they're others. So you also, the building those relationships up with other countries is also really critical. And we have that ability if we build strong coalitions, right? So the other thing is obviously they're always trying to, keep us out of our spaces, and we want to fight for making sure that we have the access. We have a lot of there's a lot of obstacles as being not the member states, but it's really critical to always be in as many rooms as possible and to build relationships with people who can inform you on what's happening in the rooms that you're not in. And we've already been working to isolate the United States. And so I think that moving forward, this is going to be a big part of the rest of our tactics, right? The US is always being problematic. They think they're the leaders. The rest of the world thinks that they're the bullies. And so we actually have that power. And by the end of the last round of negotiations, there were 100 different states that stood up together to say they will only work for a real and binding treaty that's going to make real changes, and they're not willing to sell out the answers to lowest common denominator. So we know that we have that power. We have no idea if they're showing up or not. We just can't tell what's going to happen next. Honestly, so far the government has not been allowed to go to international negotiations.
Time check.
Right. And just to wrap up, to say that we know that there's so much interest in making sure that there's a good, solid treaty that There's also a possibility of moving outside of the UN system and getting a coalition of the willing, which is what they did for landmines. And with 100 countries standing strong against the United States and the rest of the obstructors, we have that possibility to go in that direction. So that's what I have for you today.
Thanks so much, Jess. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, in our next speaker now is going to talk about what we can do right here in New York State to address the plastics pollution. Our next speaker is Alexis Goldsmith. She is an organizer, she works with Beyond Plastics, and her work focuses on building grassroots capacity to pass strong laws to decrease the production and use of plastics. When not training organizers or lobbying in the New York State Capitol, she works at her native tree nursery in Rensselaer County. It's called First Draft Farm Nursery, which you're after my own heart there, Alexis.
Thank you. Not relevant to the bill at all, but I feel it's very important to touch grass and touch dirt, you know, as much as we can every day, get outside. Should I just talk about the bill? Are we feeling tired, or do you want some slides?
Sure. So Jess, if you can stop sharing, we're still seeing your slides.
Okay.
And then Alexis, whatever you want. Yeah, we are running over time, and we do want time to hear from Mayor Armacost because she's talking on the municipal level, which is our most
Relevant,
grassroots level. So
Okay.
and I do have, but I think talk about lobby day and other things like that.
Great. So I'll just talk then, because I can give an elevator pitch. So Raya kind of talked about how the federal government right now feels totally out of control and out of our hands, but we really have an opportunity at the state level, and I think Assemblymember Levenberg was kind of getting at this, to pass laws that are actually going to make a change. But the industry is in state government as well. Albany is crawling with lobbyists on behalf of the American Chemistry Council, the Plastics Industry Association, Exxon, Chemours, Dow, all the companies that are making a lot of money off of pumping fossil fuels and producing more and more plastic that ultimately becomes the waste that goes to the incinerator. So reducing our food waste is great. That reduces waste that goes to the incinerator. Recycling is great. Paper, aluminum, glass, those can all be reused and recycled. But plastic is a particularly challenging material. It's really not designed to be reused or recycled. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So the recycling rate in the US for plastic is less than 6%. And single-use plastic, in particular, plastic packaging, makes up almost half of the plastic that's being produced around the globe today, which is about 440 million metric tons every year. We all see it when we go to the grocery store. We see, rows and rows of plastic packaging. Here I've got an image to go with this. So we're all familiar, I think, with this site when we go to the grocery store, where plastic is really only has a useful life for a very short amount of time for how long it lasts. It never biodegrades. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces that become microplastics and nanoplastics, which we're all eating, drinking, and breathing. And another thing of concern with plastic are the chemicals that are in plastic. 16,000 chemicals are added to plastics. Most of them have not been tested for safety, but we do know that plastic has things like PFAS in it, bisphenol phthalates, which are really bad for women's reproductive health. And most of those are not regulated in the packaging itself, and also not regulated when it goes to the incinerator in Peekskill. PFAS is coming out of the stacks, dioxins coming out of the stacks, heavy metals, and who knows what else that hasn't even been tested in the plastic. So we have a particular concern with reducing plastic packaging, and there is a state bill that would do that. It's called the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, sponsored by Senator Harcum of Westchester and Assemblymember Glick. Those are the bill numbers. And I'll quickly summarize. I'll skip all the sad parts about plastic and just summarize what the bill does. So the first thing the bill does is reduces plastic packaging. Any company that grosses more than 5 million in sales or more than 2 tons of packaging will have to reduce their packaging 30% in 12 years. It was 50% at the end of last session. That got changed to 30 by the Senate majority. We didn't have any control of that. That's a whole other long story, but 30% is still good when you combine it with the other requirements of the bill. So all secondary packaging will have to be reduced by half, and then 75% of the remaining packaging will have to be reused or recycled at a rate, sorry, all of the remaining packaging will have to be reused or recycled at a rate of 75%. So this is going to greatly reduce waste going to landfills and incinerators, because 40% of solid waste in New York is packaging and paper products. This bill will require companies to pay for the cleanup of their packaging, so they'll have to pay a fee per packaging to pay for recycling, disposal, and incineration, but they're required to meet those recycling rates, those reduction rates, and they're also incentivized to make their packaging even better. If they make it better for the environment, like do reusable packaging, they won't have to pay anything. But basically, this is going to reimburse municipalities for the cost of waste management and cleanup. To put that into perspective, New York City pays about $500 million a year for their waste management. The bill will also prohibit 16 toxic chemicals from packaging, and these are the chemicals that are currently in packaging. It's not regulated at all, but they will have, the producers, the companies will have to get these chemicals out. They will not be able to use the packaging that contains these chemicals in New York State under this bill. Phthalates are really bad for women's reproductive health. Heavy metals cause developmental problems. Toluene is the chemical that was leaching into people's basements in the Love Canal disaster. So this is a public health issue as much as it is a solid waste issue. And these will also reduce the chemicals coming out of the stacks of New York's 10 incinerators. Under this bill, any type of waste to fuel or waste to energy will not count as recycling. And it has strong oversight and accountability. So this is an EPR bill, extended producer responsibility. The companies will have to form what's called a producer responsibility organization. This type of bill has been enacted in places in 5 other states and in the European Union and other places around the world. But what's different about this bill is that it doesn't give any control over the program requirements to the companies. The program requirements are set in statute. So that's the reduction, the recycling requirements, the toxics provision, the strict definition of recycling. That's all in statute. The companies will not be able to decide that. The PRO is only going to collect fees on the packaging and reimburse municipalities. So that's what this bill does. And here's an action you can take right now. You can write to your legislators. And if you take this action, I can get in touch with you to learn more about how we're going to get this bill done. But the long and short of it is this bill passed the Senate last year on the last day of session. It was very dramatic. We were scrambling to get loopholes out of it that the Senate tried to put in at the last minute to prevent the bill from being weakened. And then it was ready to go in the Assembly. It had passed all of the relevant committees, and then we ran out of time in the Assembly to bring it to a vote. Very annoying that the Senate or that the Assembly waits until the last minute to do climate legislation. Like, they're not doing anything right now except for ceremonial bills, basically. So they waited until the very end of session. But we're only 6 Assembly members away from a majority in the Assembly and only 3 senators away from a majority in the Senate. On Tuesday of this week, it passed the Senate ENCON committee. On Tuesday of last week, it passed the Assembly ENCON committee, so it's moving. But the American Chemistry Council, the Business Council are swarming around this bill. They've managed to get a rival bill introduced that's very weak. They're telling legislators not to support PREA. They're spending a lot of money trying to out-organize us, basically. But we're going to out-organize them with grassroots power. So you can take this quick action, and then if you want to take more action, I can get in touch with you if you take this action. Or just sign up now to join us in Albany on May 7th, where we're going to have a rally. We're going to meet with every legislator who's in the majority, or at least that's our goal, and get this bill moving soon after budget to get it to the floor for a vote. So that's where we're at. Let's reduce plastic packaging, and I'll stop talking now because we need to go to the mayor.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I appreciate it. And I've been dropping in the chat links to the lobby day. If you want to drop the links to the action, that'd be great. And then there were some folks who I know on the New York is Not Disposable call this week, Judith was talking about like which legislators we need to be targeting. And I don't know if there's like an action alert or script or something you can drop in the chat for some folks that are looking for actions around that, or even how folks can join that call.
Folks want to join that call, they should just either take the action in the chat or just email me directly and I'll add you to the list. Even if you can't join the call, I send all the updates and actions to the listserv.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, and our last but not least speaker is Mayor Nikki Armacost from Hastings-on-Hudson, and she's got a really long list of climate accomplishments that I'm not going to go through all of them, but because I'm sure some of that's going to be what she's talking about. But she's been involved with ICLEI, which I'm sure she'll define as well, and really I think has been a leader. I think you're in your last term as well, right? So she's been a real climate leader here in Westchester County. And when I say that, it's the kind of leadership that we really, really need right now, because not only did she use her office and her like legal authority as an elected official to lead and do things and accomplish things, but she uses the soft power of being a leader, not the mayor, but a leader, to really kind of model for other elected officials what could be done. And I know she's been really an ally to WAS in helping reach out to other mayors, share information on things that we're working on, and being that kind of soft power leader that we really need right now. Like Chuck Schumer should take lessons from Mayor Armacost. So with that, I'm going to shut up and hand it off to her to talk about strategies that our municipal elected officials and decision makers could use to keep making progress on the municipal level. Go ahead, Mayor Armacost. Thank you.
Courtney, thank you for that very lovely and gracious introduction, and to all the members of the WAS collective for including me. It's been fantastic to be on the call. It's fascinating to listen to all the other speakers who are all just amazing intellects and clearly activists that we should all be following. So it's just been great to be here. I just want to give a little bit of context about Hastings-on-Hudson for people who don't know where we are. We're a population of about 8,500 in an area of just under 3 miles square, and we're located on the banks of the Hudson River, about 20 miles north of New York City. It's very hilly, the views are gorgeous, and our community is really very committed to environmental activism. And I always say we have an open immigration policy, so you're all welcome to move here and come and join us. As you mentioned, Courtney, one of my roles is serving on the board of ICLEI, which is a consortium of mayors from across the US, and there's actually a global consortium, and I'm on the board of the regional council, which is for North America. And I'm working with mayors from all over the place. And the horror stories at the moment about climate in other parts of the US are really pretty horrific. So while there's always room for improvement, we have to remind ourselves that we're very lucky to be in New York. New York State's been a really pretty good ally for us at the municipal level. We've got a great legislative framework in terms of the CLCPA, which many of us fought for. We've got funding, most recently through the Environmental Bond Act and the Climate Superfund Act, which I think the governor signed on the very last possible day that she could sign anything in December. And then we've got these great programs like Climate Smart Communities and Clean Energy Communities, where municipalities can choose to undertake a very broad range of actions that provide points and, in some cases, even cash. So, you know, the task was to provide strategies, tactics, policies, and plans to address this traumatic moment that we're in vis-a-vis the federal government. And so I'll throw out three that are very practical things. And the first is really learn about these programs, learn about the Climate Smart Communities program, the soon to be reincarnated Clean Energies program, because they provide very clear, well thought out, structured, performance-based pathways for municipalities to advance a climate agenda. And quite honestly, the federal government is largely irrelevant to these efforts. So, you know, there are many actions that can be accomplished on a hyperlocal level that will move the dial. The programs help you as a municipality document and celebrate what you've done, benchmark yourself against others, and get ideas about new climate actions and strategies. Some of those actions do require substantial funding, but many can be pursued by enthusiastic volunteers at low or no cost. And they range from enacting legislation or policies. I see Nick from Westchester Power on the call, so adopting a CCA would be an excellent example of that. A fleet efficiency policy, a green building code, to planning exercises, greenhouse gas inventories, climate action plans, comprehensive plans, studies, natural resources inventories and flood studies, and waste reduction strategies, repair cafes, take it or leave it sheds, food waste reduction and composting, and energy reduction community campaigns like Community Solar and Drive Electric. All of those kinds of things are really not dependent on the federal government, federal funding, or anything at the federal level. They're all very, very local types of initiatives. And so I think that a very powerful act of resistance in the current environment at the municipal level is to make a commitment to advance under these programs, to really move the dial in the tiny little location which you call home. We're in Hastings, we're currently the highest ranked climate smart community in New York State, which we're very proud of. And if you can't tell already, I'm completely obsessed with these programs. I'd be delighted to provide advice to any other municipal officials or volunteers on how to progress. And, you know, I could talk about these programs for hours. So if there are questions, we can take it up in the chat and just reach out to me directly. But I think that's a really important thing for municipalities to be able to do. The second strategy, various other speakers alluded to this, but it's really important to inform your legislators and your electeds about how current federal policies are affecting you or your municipality. So send letters with your stories, encourage your municipal leaders to participate in sign-on letters. We just heard an example of one, adopt progressive resolutions. We know from legislators higher up the food chain, and it actually applies to us on the municipal level, that it really makes a difference to receive input from communities and from municipal officials, letters and resolutions. Right now, we're focusing on the Con Edison rate increase, the bottle bill, the packaging bill, New York Heat, and Stop Project Maple. All of these are worth supporting. So, you know, those letters make a difference. If you think they don't make a difference, if you think that your legislators are not listening or your electeds are not listening, we actually do read those things, and I believe they do higher up the food chain. And then the third thing is just offer to implement something new in your community. As a municipal leader, it's really amazing to learn that there is a group of residents who want to make something cool and new happen locally, and that they're prepared to take the initiative to make it happen. So to give you an example, in Hastings, our volunteers were the ones who came up with the idea of the take it or leave it shed, which we copied from Larchmont. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's take it or leave it shed, Tilly shed, but we did. We not only coveted it, we took it completely. It's our volunteers who are the ones who are planting trees as nature-based solutions for flooding. They started our local Pollinators Pathway program. They initiated our plastic bag ban. I could go on. And most municipalities won't say no if you offer to spearhead something yourself. So really do take that initiative. And I do want to say, I mean, I think there's definitely, again, room for improvement at the federal level, but the Biden administration was really a fantastic partner for us on climate. We got very, very valuable funding, especially for infrastructure and resilience projects under mechanisms like the IRA and ARPA funding. And that helped us to take on big infrastructure projects that would otherwise be cost prohibitive. And even though the funding from the feds is maybe drying up, maybe not drying up, maybe if we talk about, we don't use the word climate change, but we use extreme weather events, which are definitely affecting red states as well as our states. The New York State is providing funding, and we just recently were awarded a $2.5 million grant through the New York State Green Resiliency Grant Program for constructing a detention pond with a drainage bypass that will reduce flooding in our municipality, which will be huge. So I think I'm an eternal optimist. I always see the glass as half full, and the work that all of you are doing is making a huge difference. I think it's very, very helpful to have community members supporting things that we're doing right and giving us ideas about things that we can do better, and acting in community. So thank you for including me. I see that there are some questions in here.
Yeah, I've been populating the chat with links and things as you were speaking, including a link to the spring thing that is happening May 4th. And WAS will be there with a table with info about our work and like defining community choice aggregation and things like that.
Oh, no, that's good. And I'll put a link in here. This is our Climate Smart Communities Task Force page, where you can see a bunch of the initiatives that we moved forward with community members and in some cases consultants, but a lot of the work we ended up doing ourselves, and the federal government was not involved at all. So we can move forward without that reference on certain things.
Awesome. Well, it is discussion time, and we did go over with our speakers, but I think having the county executive and Dana Levenberg on earlier was really valuable. So I appreciate everybody allowing them the extra time. So let's see. Nick, do you want to just come off mute and talk about that?
Yeah, just to say that my comment just now about HVRC,
which stands for
Hudson Valley Regional Council. So yeah, they're just a local regional entity, and there's groups like that, or I should say hubs like that across. I don't know what the right term for that is, but anyway, in our area, they're supportive of municipalities trying to take some of these actions that the mayor went on very eloquently about, and so they are a good resource to tap into for support for maybe engaging your municipality on those steps, because the Climate Smart Communities is a particularly like involved one versus the Clean Energy Communities program in terms of just kind of the data tracking and the inputs that go into that. So that could definitely become a little bit of a labor for folks if they try to go after those different levels of accreditation with CSC. But yeah, so that's a good resource, HVRC, if you're looking for something.
Thanks. Yeah, and a lot of our communities are working with the Hudson Valley Regional Council because they are the entity that is kind of program managing the Climate Action Planning Institute, which is a grant that the county got. Peekskill participated. I was a volunteer for the city as part of that initiative. So folks can just Google Hudson Valley Regional Council. But WAS also, if your community, your group, your school, or your municipality are interested in securing grant funding, WAS is working with We Act for Environmental Justice on their Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. It is a mouthful, but the idea is you don't know where to start to get a grant, or you need help with something specific to qualify or apply for a grant, or you don't know how you'll manage the grant once you get it. The Tic Tac can help you with all of those things. And I put a link in the chat to our landing page on the WAS website with more info on what that is. But also we are having an in-person training where we're going to bring in the grants experts from the Tic Tac, and you can talk with them directly, but you don't, and that's on May 6th, but you don't need to wait for May 6th. On our website are links. If you want to just start, they'll just call them up on the phone. They will meet with you and can help you with that. Any other questions for any of our speakers? I know Shay had to drop off, but other folks are still on. So I had one for, just another one for Mayor Armacost, which is, now that you are, not worrying about re-election as mayor, are there any kind of lame duck efforts that you are pushing for before you go?
I think I think the lame duck thing, hopefully I'm not a lame duck. Hopefully I'm a very sort of flappy, active, wild duck in this last year. But climate has always been something that I've been obsessed with. And one of the things that I want to do is make sure that that Hastings is as far advanced as it can possibly be before I leave. And there are a number of different initiatives. When you're not running for election, I don't think you should really care that much anyway. You should just fight for the things that you believe in, irrespective of whether you're running for election or not. But when you're not running for election, you can be even more sort of, how can I put it? Obnoxious in your enthusiasm for the things that you care about. So I'm planning to do that, and I will certainly be doing it after I end up stepping down. But there's a lot we need to fight for at the moment.
Agreed. I just dropped again in the chat the link to the comment page. So talking about actions that can be done that we spoke about today. We really need folks to comment on that study because we need the county to stop kicking the can and studying it and start acting, because we're talking about actions that different levels of government can take and how we can make those happen. And I think that is really a key one. We could really move to sustainable solutions and shut down the county's largest industrial source of greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. So we need to really inspire our county executive to get that done, because I know we have some of our county legislators on the call today that are already on board and pushing for that. And if Erica, if you're still on and there's anything you want to add about action items or things that we can do to support the county's efforts, feel free. Other action items that were covered, Alexis shared a link to the Beyond Plastics, like New York packaging reduction. efforts. So in addition to the lobby day, there are like ongoing actions that can be done there. We have the stuff Dana Levenberg mentioned about Project Maple. So folks maybe on this call are more waste focused versus fracked gas pipelines focused, but the pipeline 400 feet from where I'm sitting right now, that also goes under the nuclear power plant, that evil international conglomerate wants to expand it yet again to carry more fracked gas. And we want to get out ahead of that and make sure the industry knows we're going to be fighting it. So of course, Dana Levenberg is already leading the charge on that. So there's a link in the chat to the rally regarding that. And what other action items were covered? Did I miss any? Or if others have, I know other folks, if you've got upcoming events and you want to drop links to those in the chat. Richard, I know Scarsdale has an event coming up. I dropped the spring thing in the chat. WAS is going to be, out in force at all of the Earth Day events that we can. We're going to be focusing on still with the county executive being our target, because really, it was previously George Latimer, now it's Ken Jenkins. They really have the power to move the county on this. So, we're going to be out and about on that. Raya Salter just put the link in the chat to the climatejusticevoters.org website that she mentioned. We will going to save the chat and make sure that we have all these links. We will send out the all of those links from each of our speakers so that you have those, as well as the recording of this event, to our email list. If you did not, if you joined this through the kind of generic link, but you can join through the meeting link, then we will have your email and you can get on our email list. Any other questions? Because I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Okay, Jess, do you want to talk about what you just dropped in the chat for people?
That's some of our, it's from our Africa group on World Recycling Day. It's got a really interesting panel of like 8 different people speaking about what all is going on. Also, I recommend a lot of, because I work with people all around the world, I often RSVP for their webinars just so I get the on the video sent to me afterwards, because they're not always at convenient times. So if you sign up for it and if you're interested in it, they'll get sent to you. It's just, I think it's always helpful to learn what's working and what's not working around the world, because there's a lot of countries that are a lot further along on the path than we are, and then there are others that are further behind us. So if we can all be communicating, we can get our power built.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are aware that there are communities that get our non-recycled plastics, which is a big problem. Jane put in the chat, a bike ride for climate change awareness, Albany to New York City. Wow. That is awesome, Jane.
For those of you who are doing that bike ride, Hastings is on the way, so feel free to drop in. We'd be very happy to see you.
All right, so if we are just about done, I'm just going to share a couple more slides. So, I put the link back in the chat. This is the waste reduction study. We want them to stop studying and start planning a zero waste plan. So make that comment. And then if you want to get more involved with WAS, we have our meetings weekly at 6 o'clock. And we also have a smaller group that meets Mondays at 2:30, all on Zoom. Shoot us an email, and you don't need to have any experience. You just need to be ready to dive in and help. And then save the dates. So we are working on our speaker for our next Zero Waste Task Force meeting. We're hoping to get an elected official from Florida whose incinerator, that their municipality was working on getting off of trash incineration when their incinerator caught on fire. And so they were just like instantly off trash incineration because their incinerator caught on fire. But we have not confirmed that yet. So if you sign up, you'll get the email when we know. And then the other is to save the date for our React Tic-Tac in-person training, which will be May 6th in Yonkers. We are probably going to be at the BZAC Center. So save that date. And Jess, did you have something to add? Go ahead.
Just quick, because if I don't say it now, I'll forget it. If you would like connections to some of the groups in Florida that are engaged in that fight, including some of the environmental justice groups, we have a coalition that we've brought together down there. So I'm happy to connect you with them.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your time and all the discussion. It was wonderful. To our speakers, thank you so much for blocking out 2 hours tonight. It's a lot of time, and I know you're all very busy. We're very grateful. And I'm happy to stay on for a little bit longer, but I'm going to end the recording. And thank you all for coming. Have a great night, and let's keep pushing, because we have to remember we're here in Westchester pushing, but there are folks like us all across the country that are going to be still fighting and pushing despite what is going on at the federal level to keep making progress and keep making change. So thank you so much for coming out tonight, and have a good night.